right there. David? Good evening, everyone. My name is David Please be seated. My name is David Elwood, and my job is to get off the stage as quickly as possible. We have an extraordinary treat tonight in that we have Yo-Yo Ma here with us. Once in a generation, a classically trained performer becomes so remarkable in their capacity to give voice to extraordinary pieces of music that captures our imagination, carries us on the wings of their insights and views and emotions and everything else, so that even without crossing to the pop world, they become a household name. And Yo-Yo Ma is such a person. One of the most extraordinary things about him, besides his music, where he started at age 4, educated at Juilliard, also at Harvard. And by the way, I was at Harvard at the same time, so I was really quite involved. Yeah, that's right. We're in Courier House together. But he's won every conceivable award in this business. He's been involved in everything from the World Economic Forum to receiving the Crystal Award, the Presidential Medal of Honor, the National Medal of Arts, and so forth. But he also serves as a UN Messenger of Peace and as a member of the President's Committee on Arts and Humanities. He's just performed for 8 presidents, and the only reason I hesitate to do that is it dates you slightly. So, but he's just extraordinary in so many different ways, and he presented on the occasion of the 56th inaugural of.
No, I may have played for 8 presidents, but he worked for 4. Big difference.
You're more successful.
No.
It's worse than that. He played for presidents he worked for presidents you didn't play for.
No, it's not true.
But what is equally extraordinary is the fact that he's also used music in so many ways to make a huge difference about bringing the world together, becoming a cultural entrepreneur, a cultural messenger in so many ways. In 1998, he established the Silk Road Project, which is, to quote, promote the study of cultural, artistic, and intellectual traditions along the ancient Silk Road route that stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the Pacific Ocean. If you've ever had a chance to hear or participate or hear those musicians, with or without Yo-Yo Ma, it is a truly meaningful and compelling experience. They are now, the Silk Road Group have commissioned more than 60 different works in different traditions. They now are doing work in New York City with the schools, and they have major projects in the middle schools, isn't it? Multidisciplinary projects and the like. And he's done everything from work with the faculty around Harvard to teach here at Harvard master's programs. But most importantly, he has served as an ambassador for cultural understanding, bringing us together, and leadership. The Kennedy School aspires to all the things that this man represents. I cannot tell you how honored we are to have Yo-Yo Ma here. Please give him a big hand. Okay. Now, we've already introduced David Gergen a little bit, and I'm going to keep it very short. David has served 4 presidents, not played for 8, and he too has been a source of remarkable inspiration. His work here is as leader of the Center for Public Leadership. He also seems to have another job at CNN or something. As I've always loved to say, when David spoke on CNN, everybody listened because you didn't know what he was going to say ahead of time, and that's what
He didn't either.
So now let me get off the stage and give these two a chance to reward us with their insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And thank you, all of you, very much for coming this evening. We're delighted to see you. This is an evening, as you might imagine, we've looked forward to for a long time. And you not only see our wonderful guest here tonight, but if you look closely, you might see a cello right back here behind him. And perhaps we'll find, now where did that come from?
That's where it is.
Yes, that's where you've been looking for it.
I thought it was in the cab. I was gonna find it. Amazing.
Well, we're delighted to see you with the cello, and perhaps he hasn't volunteered. Perhaps we can coax him to play before this is over. We're going to have a conversation for just a while, and then we'll eventually turn it over to you for questions. And we'll probably be here for 7:15 or so. Well, it depends. Last night, a freshman here at the college called his dad and said, "Dad, I just had a wonderful Harvard moment. I've been studying for midterms. I've been glued to the library, but last night I was able to go home. And as I was walking home in the cold, I went by a chapel, and there was this music emanating from the chapel. And it was just so gorgeous. I had to look in. I took a peek in, and there, this Harvard moment, there was the most acclaimed classical musician in the world, Yo-Yo Ma, conducting a master's class for Harvard students. What a wonderful experience for a freshman. What a wonderful experience, and what a great Harvard moment this is for us tonight. Thank you. Thank you for
Did you
coming.
just make that up?
You know,
very good story.
you raised the bar for everybody. You know that.
That's a very good story.
Let me ask you a question. Most of us are familiar with the chronicle of your youth. You're born to Chinese parents, learning to play at 4, living in Paris, and then coming to the United States at 7, I think you came. So you had this sort of tripartite set of loyalties, affiliations, and loves, and went on to Juilliard, and then made the decision to come to Harvard. And what I've never really understood very well, because you've become such a citizen of Harvard, what was it about that experience when you were an undergraduate that made a difference in your life?
Well, I think to this day, I often say that there's nothing I've done since college, any project, any way of thinking, that didn't actually start in some way, the seeding of which started in college. So it was a momentous time for me. And when I think back as a 58-year-old, you know, we all have earlier ages that we think we are.
What age do you think you are?
I think I'm 17.
Do you really?
Yeah.
When you turn 60, I think you'll get a little older in your head.
Really?
Yeah, that's what I've
I'll
noticed.
become 18?
Yeah,
Okay. How old do you think you are? In your head?
My wife thinks I'm about 14.
14.
But,
Yeah, that's right. But what's very interesting, and you know, you think I'm joking, but actually I'm not. Because the other age I feel that I'm very close to is when I was 7. But that was when we moved from France to the United States. So those are two actually dramatic changes in my life that somehow, you know, they weren't necessarily, traumatic or whatever, but they were such big changes that for me, it locates the time that, the linear time of my life.
So interesting. But now, dig a little deeper. You majored in anthropology here?
I majored in music, but I would have majored in anthropology. I took many courses, and it was probably, for me, the liberating subject that allowed me to look at my own background, the tripartite background, as you put it so succinctly, and that allowed me to look at each culture and its value systems, the priorities that each culture places on a value, and suddenly those places that were kind of muddled in my mind gained a little bit of clarity.
Did that also contribute to the sense that you've expressed that the sounds of music are sort of the surface, but what's important is also what's going on underneath, and the question of humanity and who you are and your beliefs, your passions?
Well, that's a very, very good question. I think that as a young person, I had a wonderful teacher here at Harvard, Leon Kirshner, was a composer, and he used to look at me and say, "Yo-Yo, you haven't found your sound."
Haven't found your style.
Your sound.
Your sound.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know how people who write. They're finding their voice. Artists need to find their voice. Well, I was told you don't have your sound. He says, I'll give you 13 years. And he made up something and says, maybe then you'll find your sound. So, and then he used to joke with me many years later about that. But as usual, with every even humorous statement, there's a bit of truth in it. And I think the sound that whatever you think you find, for me, was not necessarily the sound of the cello, but it's how the cello adapted to different styles of music and then could find its place within. So that, because I think one of the things I learned at Harvard is that, Harvard doesn't like superstars.
Right.
Like that. Okay. I was told.
You got that one.
Yeah, exactly. And so we were, as students, we were always told you have to find, the voice of the composer. So let alone finding your own sound, right. You have to kind of look at the voice of the composer and really trying to understand it, and then you fit. We don't want some young, brash person to say, I've got a lot of energy and technique, and I can do this, and look at me, I'm so fantastic. No, they said, no, you gotta just, really, and I swallowed all of that. Mm-hmm. I believed it. And I think, so I took on with the anthropological interest as well as my music teachers beating down on me and saying, you gotta find your way. And I was looking for that way. And gradually, I think if I had a sound, it would be, that would be the evidence of all the experiences I've had. Mm-hmm. And that sound is just the tip of the iceberg, because encoded in, a singer's voice or a writer's words, you can kind of trace when experiences get filtered and become organically part of what they express.
So, but it is, in many ways, a writer has to find a voice, a speaker has to find a voice, but as a musician, you have to find your own voice.
Absolutely.
It's interesting, and that voice comes from the sum total of who you are and your own passions.
I think so. It comes from where you start off, but I think in the end, it's really what you do with the voice, mm-hmm. right? So you have a voice. What do you choose to do?
Right. We have many aspiring, emerging leaders here at the school, and indeed all across the university and the college, of course. And there's some who assume you can just sort of walk in and lead something and be terrific at it. Malcolm Gladwell makes the argument, as you know, that it takes 10,000 hours of work to become a master. That Mozart took, if you look at his younger life, it took 10,000 hours for him to get to the point where he was writing the more mature music he was. I'm just wondering, from your point of view, of how much of an effort for you it has been. How much time have you poured in to become the master cellist?
Well, I think I got many of those 10,000 hours front-loaded.
Yeah. Chinese parents, right?
Yeah. My new word are feline parents.
Not tiger.
Well, they could become tigers.
Right,
and,
right, right.
But sometimes, so it's just proportion and size.
Yes.
When you're little, they may seem like tigers.
Yeah.
And when you grow up, they become smaller. So back to your question, the front loading.
Yeah.
I think both my sister and I had pretty much sort of a very, I would say, hothouse environment. Very kind of did a lot of work. I had to learn languages and all kinds of at home, and but what that did was that allowed a certain amount of freedom to explore. For example, in college or later on, to kind of say, okay, well, I know how to put this together. This is a game I know how to play. But then what are the other places, what are the other environments that you want to explore, which were vast, which college was the place that kind of first opened my eyes to different ways of thinking other than what I had experienced before.
As you've matured, it's been striking to so many that you've not only become the most recognized classical musician in the world, but that you've gone on to talk about music and leadership as a form of service. And you've coined this phrase about the citizen musician that you talked about in the Nancy Hanks lecture last year. Could you tell us a little bit about where that came from and what that means to you? What's going on in your head about where you are as a human being?
Well, I think in the natural course of events, well, I met my North Star very early on in life. That would be my wife. And she's here today, and she's not going to, she's right there.
Please, please.
Jill, no, she doesn't like being recognized.
Okay.
I just said that. I said that really
she's hiding
part, in
down there,
part
yeah.
to annoy her, but then
We're delighted you're here. Thank you.
So, so we had children early, and one of the things you do as a parent is that you do anything for your child. Your child goes, you know, there's show and tell. You go bring the instrument. You go do show and tell. You do what, and in a way, just from living, you accumulate a number of roles. And so I think that I'm an immigrant, and as an immigrant, you wonder, okay, what is this country about? You know, what is its history? Is my relationship with the country does it only start from the point of arrival? But then how do I understand its history and make it my own? So that's a constant process. And who do you know, we study the presidents, we study everybody, but what is my relationship to them or to people that came before me? And that's something that you know, I always wondered two things: who did it and why. And that's my whole life.
You could become a journalist.
Oh, really? Just ask a question.
Yeah,
who
that's
are
the
you,
question.
and why do you do what you do?
Right.
Okay, could you train me? Because I may need a lot
You
of
seem to
training.
be doing very well right now.
No, I don't think so. But anyway, so citizen, you know, I'm old now, so there are at least 3 generations of people that are younger than me, and I interact with them, and I don't know their worlds, but if I want to be part of their worlds, I need to actually understand what they're thinking, how they're thinking, what the millennials are like, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, being a citizen musician is just basically looking at how I can be useful, how, especially at a time when some people say, well, the arts, it's an elite thing, which is therefore a bad word, and you know, it's and the music that I play, I started from the classical tradition. That's, you know, European dead white male music, and I say, great, then why am I playing it? You know, like is something wrong with this picture? And I'm basically trying to, well, first of all, to understand things, but then as a citizen, just to try and find out how I can make a contribution other than at the voting.
Sure.
You know, and to help out. And
is that what led to your vision of the Silk Road Project, and can you tell us now where that's come?
well, I think that's, the Silk Road Project came from a set of very different experiences. One of them came through the wife of this man that is sitting right next to Jill, Merton Flemings, who's a wonderful scientist, material scientist at MIT. We're all parents in the same school, so our children were friends. And Merton's wife, Elizabeth Ten Grotenhouse, spoke to me about the path of Buddhism from India through China, and how each place deals with it differently, but yet the iconography often remains the same. So she actually gave me a way to look at sort of what is in the visual world, a way of tracing history that is culturally inspired. So instead of empires, and you could look at, well, how did something travel? How did goods travel? How did ideas travel? And so that was one beginning. Another beginning was from going right after the Israeli-Jordanian peace treaty. The same night, I had dinner with a number of people in Jerusalem, and the next day we went through the Allenby Bridge first to Petra to visit, and then went to Aqaba and visited the Hussein family, and they asked me to, on the way back to Tel Aviv, the next day, will you stop by Amman and give a master class and do a class? I said, sure, because she was the patroness of the school. I did, and I listened to two lovely students, maybe like 18, 17 years old, and they played not so well, but when I asked them, why are you doing this? What does this music mean to you? They gave answers that were so magnificent and so illuminating and so poetic. I thought, this is incredible. These people have an unbelievable inner life that is going on. And in many ways, the contrast to that experience was I would go into conservatories in the States, and where the training is very different and people play extremely well. But if I ask them, do you have a question? It says, yes, how can I, succeed at that competition? Or how can I do that? It becomes less, it's the involvement of whatever the representation of a piece might be was a slightly different kind. And I just thought, this is a very interesting thought. And that day, I had the thought of saying, it would be great to create a Middle Eastern ensemble of people and between what Elizabeth said to me about the path of Buddhism and being in Jordan and seeing those two young students, those were the germs of the idea. And certainly after 89, with the breakup of the Soviet Union, we had suddenly 16 countries that we can't pronounce their names. And I was sort of proud of having traveled quite a bit, but I knew nothing about those new countries. And I thought, this is, let's try and explore whether there's a way of looking at culture or at music through traditions and finding what traditions stay the same, what traditions change, and why, how they get renewed, and all of that kind of thing.
You've developed this in the Hanks lecture and elsewhere. You've talked about the edge, the importance of the edge, and use a metaphor of the forest meeting the savanna. And where that edge is formed, there's the greatest diversity in nature.
Right, you have the greatest new life. Yes, right. Exactly.
And do you find that in cultures then?
Well, that was an idea that that was first expressed to me by my son's 8th grade math teacher, and Joanne Larrabee, and she said, "Oh, you're thinking about these things. Do you know about that term, edge effect?" And I said, "No." I kind of looked it up and thought about it. It says, "Wow, this is really interesting because so much of what I'm thinking about in the making of instruments, in how cultures become very creative, the burst of invention in the Enlightenment or in the classical period, what motivated these people?" And I started seeing that, in fact, it is the meeting of two places, often unlikely, that spawns new ideas and new ways of thinking and of invention. And so that's something that I'm still thinking a lot about, because there seems to be still a great, a very rich vein to explore. You take an ecological term. Well, why shouldn't it apply to humans, since we are part of nature? And so that's how does that work in society? And so that's...
Well, closer to home, you've been arguing that there are three driving forces for a society. There's economics, there's politics, and culture. And culture is sort of taking a back seat in too many places. And that what you want to do is lift culture to be on an equal playing field.
Does that sound crazy?
Doesn't sound crazy to me at all.
You sure?
No.
Can I have that in writing, that you say, David Gergen says this is not a crazy idea?
I think it's inspiring. So where I come from,
Okay.
I would argue that the breakdown in politics is not about individuals, not necessarily about ideologies. It's about a breakdown in political culture. It's a breakdown in civic culture. And so when you come and talk about the artistic culture, musical culture, that rings true to me as something that could dramatically change the way we are as people, how we live with each other. And that's what I think you've come to symbolize. It's not just a great musician, but trying to understand humanity and trying to make a difference in that. And that's been, I think, from my point of view, you're there to walking. You won't say it, but when you talk about citizen musician, that's what I sort of see you as. I know you say that's your aspiration, but it seems to me you've really reached that already.
Well, we're trying to explore the beginnings of, what it might mean if we use a term like that.
Yeah.
How could that apply to people? I think I meet so many young people, and I think they're who are incredibly talented, and this is the world they face. They're young, they're passionate about what they do. They think they have a contribution to make, but they're also worried that whether they can afford to have an apartment, and whether they have health care, and so the talent and the wishes of a lot of people don't actually get interrupted by other, by other things. And I'm thinking that, there's so many people with lots of energy. So when Wendy Cobb started Teach for America, I mean, she couldn't get a job teaching because she had just graduated from college. So she tried another way to do things. And we're saying, like, there are lots of models of people who have explored other ways, and at a time when we're really concerned about job creation.
Right.
Why not, and since traditional venues may be far and few in between that could have a job for you to do this very specific thing, why don't people actually look at, try another way as one of the possibilities to look at, what the needs are in society that are not being met at this moment for whatever reason, and can you do something to impact that?
And you're trying to do that through music. This alliance, this partnership you formed with the Chicago City Schools and Chicago Public Education has really been quite striking. Tell us a little bit more about that, what you're
Well,
doing.
I think one of the things, so I'm a consultant I'm the Judson and Joyce Green consultant of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, an organization I've known for many decades, and they have a particularly enlightened administration. And under Ricardo Muti's leadership, who said to me when I asked him, what do you love besides music and your family? He says, well, I love children, I love the environment, and I actually care a lot about people in jail. That's from Ricardo Muti. I said, wow, that's really interesting. I've never met another maestro that, said these things. Says, let's do something. And in the process of working there, he's gone to detention centers, played for incarcerated people, and we've helped people create musicals and whatever. But so what's the purpose? One purpose is, as many educators want to do, is to actually break down the four walls of either the schoolhouse or the music hall. And everybody in Chicago knows the Chicago Symphony Orchestra is a great orchestra, but actually fewer people have actually gone into the hall. So why not spread out and go to hospitals, go into the schools, work with the public school system. And at CPS, I'm extremely proud that a consortium of people, the CSOs included among those, but within the Chicago public school system, Mario Russo and another person at Ingenuity Incorporated, which is an NGO, worked indefatigably. I hope that's a word. And for a number of years, and had town halls and asked parents, citizens, what do you want in your schools? And they said, we want arts, arts, arts. And so really by popular demand, so for the first time in 40 years, they created a culture plan. And then more recently, they voted for arts integration as in theater, dance, music, visual, to be part of the core curriculum. Now, that's immense. So that's literally having STEM to STEAM, turning.
Right, yeah.
But we'll do that later.
Explain that, people know that,
Okay,
yes.
the term STEM is science, technology, engineering, math. And everybody says this is the most important thing. I'm just saying, well, why don't we add an A to that and add the arts, culture, and humanities? And in fact, I think the person who may have coined that is John Maida, who is the president of RISD. So I just want to give credit. I think he may have coined that, but anyway. I'm very proud of these two things. That the orchestra now, when they go on tour, when they were recently in Russia, they went into orphanages. They spoke to. They really are doing this work that generally organizations don't do when they're on tour, but they make it part of what they do. When they went to Mexico, the same thing. And so the idea is that we're turning a great and unbelievable musical organization into a cultural organization that is wide open to the community and trying to see sort of like, well, this is how we can contribute.
Are you seeing much impact?
Well, I think the impact of the core curriculum, I think that's one thing. I think that, I don't like to use the word branding, but I think it's interesting that when I go back to my hotel, I will get the doorman say, the thing that you did in Pilsen in the Mexican neighborhood last night was fantastic, because we really did go into the neighborhoods because they own the orchestra. This is their group. And so by going into, and Chicago is very proud of its neighborhoods, so you go into each neighborhood and you have, or into a high school, you have just a very different kind of impact than by, let's say, bringing people into Orchestra Hall, which is a beautiful hall, to say, okay, now you can get a bit of culture. No, we are coming to your house, and because we would like to be part of your house.
Wow. You really could put culture up there, back where it belongs.
No, it's like what politicians do with all the chicken dinners they have to eat,
Right.
So you go into.
I hope you don't have to suffer through those too.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with a good chicken dinner.
Now, you're in the early stages of conversation about a 10-year project.
Yeah.
And we here at the Kennedy School often talk about social entrepreneurs, and you're talking about culture entrepreneurs.
Well, I think one of the, it's strange meetings. So Laura Freed, who's the CEO of the Silk Road Project, and I were, and Jill and I, we had, I think, dinner about a year and a half, 2 years ago, with Nithin Noria, who's the dean of the business school.
Right.
And we're just talking about various things, and no specific agenda. And I says, oh, I think I understand what you guys are trying to do. We just want you to know, 10 years ago, people couldn't go to the B school, probably to the Kennedy School. Also, I don't know, maybe you're way ahead of the game, and you know, but you couldn't study social entrepreneurship. But today, and just like what your dean just told us, you know, people go to the business school specifically to learn what they can do to help in the social entrepreneurship area. And he said, well, I understand that 25% of the Kennedy School students actually go into some form of public service and nonprofit work, which is amazing. That's fantastic. So he continues to say, well, you know, maybe cultural entrepreneurship could be, you know, one of those new fields that people can, you know, if you can collect the energy and the talents and the imagination and you know, the different skill sets of people who work in arts and culture, that could become a field. And so the dean of the arts and humanities, Deanna Sorensen, worked with Dean Noria to actually start and with the Silk Road Project to start a challenge of saying, well, any student in the university, if they have an idea and they want to kind of, you know, bring it to life, they can apply. There will be prize money and then the chance to work at the Innovation Lab and with faculty to actually nurture that idea until it becomes real. So this is one pathway that's been created by wonderful people to try to kind of encourage. And we had the launch of the first one last year. We're going to have another one this year. So this is a continuing thing, and I believe a growing one path that's growing. And I think, and I've been going around just looking at credible people around the country that have been doing things, and we're thinking, you know, that you can also write down those cases, you know, and so that people can study them and learn from best practices and what worked, what didn't work, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's one way to deal with issues in a society where there's less and less room for, oh, well, you know, we must deal with this problem and forget this problem, or it becomes a political football, or it becomes whatever. We know that culture does not, it's really easy to destroy something that's built up. It's really hard to build it up. So I think it's very hard for, if you want to grow something, to have those interruptions for the young people as well as for organizations.
Well, I know Dean Elwood is anxious to, eager to explore this further as a conversation. And please know, one of the things we've been blessed with here at the Kennedy School is people who come through. Your friend Damien Wetzel came here to the Kennedy School as he was retiring from the New York City Ballet, and then used this education to go forward in New York City.
And he's done incredible things.
He's doing wonderful things.
You were one of his teachers.
Yes, I was.
Right?
We were pleased to have him in the classroom. He made a big difference here.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, he was.
And you noticed him when he was a student, and you've kind of followed up with him.
Absolutely. Well, actually, my wife knew more about him than I did. But she said we used to meet his wife. You know, she was also a dancer, as you know.
Unbelievable.
And but Damien was a star student here, and has really done, I think, extraordinary things in New York and with Aspen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of our thinking has come from working with Damien.
Yeah.
He's helped us with our end of the year events with the New York City schools. We would bring them together. They would create their own sort of program that refers back to their year of learning. And I mean, he is absolutely, he's one of my heroes. You know, I look up to him in terms of his focus, his energy, his imagination. And it's just,
you know, Reynold Levy, who runs the Lincoln Center.
Yes.
He's coming here next year to the Kennedy School.
How wonderful.
He's going to be joining us here in the second semester of next year. I think that's right, Max. Yeah, second semester of next year. So we've been looking forward to that as well.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny because I first met him maybe probably 25 years ago when he became cultural sort of presenter at, or the president of the board of the 92nd Street Y. And then he went from there to AT&T.
Right.
And then, so I've been following his, all his accomplishments and how great that he's coming here, and that would be a wonderful thing.
Sure.
Congratulations. That's
Let me ask you one last question, and maybe we can. I see that cello warming up in the background.
yeah, it's getting a little hot here.
You spoke to the young global leaders in Davos, I guess, a couple of years ago, and they asked you sort of for your advice for young aspiring leaders about their lives and how they should plan and think about if you really want to make an impact on the world. I'd just be curious if you could offer a couple of thoughts to this group.
Just say that again. I was actually distracted because I was actually thinking, what am I going to play?
Yes, I understand.
And I
was
was
distracted by that thought too. But let me. So
I was actually debating, sort of like.
I'm just as you have young people coming up now, and there are just so many students here at the county school, at the college, at the business school, and elsewhere, who are going to have an enormous impact on the world. And I'm just eager for what's your advice to them about, at this stage of their lives, about how they can prepare themselves better to make a difference?
Wow. I think Steve Seidel said once, if you want to be successful at the School of Education, get yourself a theory, right? Didn't you say that? Right?
Get yourself a theory.
Yeah, a theory, Yeah. So I think everything we do is between, having a concept and getting to the reality of things. That's really the crux of things. And so whatever you're doing, I know from my own life is that I get very blinkered. I must do this. This is on my to-do list. You have to write lists every day. I hope you don't have to write lists every day because maybe you're too young and maybe your mom tells you what to do. I don't know. My mom's too old to tell me what to do. I tell her what to do now, which is it's a very different thing now. But anyway, I would say that the real benefit of focusing on something is, on the one hand, to go very deep into it, but on the other hand, is to also build greater awareness, which, if you're completely in something, you can go, you can discover the world through digging very, very deep. But you also need to kind of come out and of that whole and look at the world. And I think for example, what culture, what the arts do, it actually stimulates all your senses, and it brings a greater awareness of your everyday environment. And as you go from your dorm to your apartment, your hovel, just kidding, into the school, just look around. Like, look a little bit more carefully, and look again, and see who's walking by. Think about who they are, what their lives are like, what your life is like, and just spend a little bit of time doing that, because just by doing that day after day, you build an awareness that actually goes with the theories and all that, and you want to bring the two closer all the time. I think it's I've had to learn the hard way, because playing the cello was easy for me. I could solve a lot of problems in a short period of time, that I get very impatient. And so you're obviously all really incredibly capable and bright people. Maybe everybody tells you that all the time, but what I'm saying is that it's one thing to understand your own process, but it's actually even more important to understand someone else's process. So I can tell you that when I perform, I'm not the most important person in the room. The audience is the most important person in the room. So it really doesn't matter what beautiful theories I have in my head and how much I know something. It's really, my job is to make sure that something that we're sharing with one another stays in your mind, stays in your memory. And so that's, so in whatever you do, and you're going to be very active in whatever, just make sure that the things that you do really get to where they really need to. Check in on that. Make sure that that long arc is absolutely, that there are no interruptions. Look for where the interruptions are, because there are always interruptions. What's the thing? And often it's the thing that people haven't thought of. So that's where looking carefully, and not just in your habitual way, but actually expanding a little bit more, I think is really great. Do the AT&T thing, reach out and whatever. So you would like me to play something?
We would like to coach you into doing it.
Coach. Okay,
Coax.
Oh, coax.
Coax.
I'd like you to coach me into doing
No.
something. So,
Coax.
So I don't know whether to, I'd like to maybe try an experiment. I also have to put my trousers legs down. I'm thinking. So, let me try something on you, okay? I'm going to just play the end of a piece of music, and I'm going to try and test your ability to fill in the gaps. Okay? Now, so basically, I'm going to play a piece of music that's about 2 minutes long, and somewhere around 1 minute and 15 seconds, let's say. So will you help me, Mike, just for now? So basically, there is a note that I can't play and hold on to. So I need your help. And I'm going to first demonstrate this with Mike Block, wonderful cultural entrepreneur. At age 31, he's done amazing things. I look up to him. And so he's Daddy Block now. So he's going to fill in that note, and then I'm going to ask you to sing it at the right time with him, so that we actually get to the end of the piece. Because you become the thrust and the propulsion for the piece that can take it to another level. Okay? So, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now, what's the best way to do this? So there are two things that are going to happen in this piece. I'm going to go blithely along, and you're going to say, oh, it's lovely, it's beautiful, nice music. I hope you're going to do that. And then, at some point, it's going to stop. That's like one of those interruptions that we talked about.
Right.
What happened? Something very different is going to happen. That's one thing. First, the interruption. I'll stop, I'll look at you, and you'll know. Then, I'm going to go now from the interruption to the end, because just a little bit into it, he's going to play that note that you're going to sing when I play through the whole piece. Okay, you guys game? All right?
Okay.
All right. So this is how it goes. So this is after interruption. Stop. Okay, then. heard that, okay? Are you game? So basically, all of you stand up. All right. Now, so basically, we're just going to practice this one. Can you sing a version of this note? Very quietly at first. Great. You are very talented. You all get check plus plus and a gold star. Okay? So now the rest of you, now if you're willing to stand for like a minute, get to the interruption, and then Daddy Bloch is going to play the daddy note, which is going to give us the sustenance we need to finish the job. Okay? So, here we go. What?
Should we teach them the last note too?
You can all morph into the last note, and we're going to rely on your talents to get there. Okay? So here's the beginning. Yes! All right. Well done, sir. Yes. Thanks, Mikey. Thanks. Okay. See? Yeah. Thank you. Bravo. Give yourselves a big pat on the back. This is just great.
I can't remember a moment like this. The kind of was wonderful. We have microphones. Time for a few questions. They're here and here, here and here, as they often are. Always end please with a question mark, and one per customer. The old Joe Nye rules.
One per customer.
So, who would like to come forward?
No double dipping.
Yeah, no double dipping. Where? Yes, please. Here. Identify yourself if you would, please.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Allegra, and I'm from MIT, but I also take classes here. I'm very curious and very moved by the place between the two worlds. And my question is, do you see technology as a place where these worlds meet, and how does it inform your practice? Thank you.
Well, I think, first of all, without the technology we have, I don't think we could have the Silk Road Project. It is only because that we have today's internet that we could bring the internet of antiquity into present form. that it's only because of technology that we can have instruments who play at different decibel levels be able to match and be able to be in one room together. So I think I'm very conscious of the fact that so today's technology, in terms of the internet, is obviously it's a huge delivery system. But what we want to do is to make sure that what are the deliverables, and that we want to make sure that the deliverables are not just contentful, but are given in the right form, you know, with the right values, and so I think that's something that we work on. Thank you.
Please.
Sir.
Yo-Yo Ma, my name is Ben Bolger, and I'm a Harvard alum. The question I have for you is, you talked about citizenship in a very broad context, and I wanted to ask you kind of a philosophical question to kind of get at your notions of citizenship. You talked about your inspirational journey to America. There's been other performers that have been foreign-born that have come here that have taken on a political identity. But our Constitution specifies that people that are not born in America are not eligible to become president. Now, I know that you may not aspire to run to be president, but what I wonder is, with regard to citizenship, should we see foreign-born immigrants that come here enjoying equal status, or do you, with your own experience, see the wisdom in the Constitution as it relates to that issue?
Wow. Well, first of all, I am, you know, I believe I'm a human being first, and a citizen second, and a musician third, and a cellist fourth. And somewhere, I hope I'm a husband. Hopefully a father, you know. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But it's like we each have to kind of figure out those alignments, and at different times. So I think, you know, the way I think about citizenship obviously has evolved from, you know, as an aging person in his twilight years. And that's what Manny says. I'm just quoting him. And so I believe that you know, there's the phrase that to whoever you've been given a lot, you should, you know, what's the phrase? Come on, you know that.
Much is expected.
Much is expected. I mean, you know, I'm a very lucky guy. I have a job. I have a wonderful family. And I always want to justify something in my head to say, why am I so lucky? And also, as we are aware and look at different places, you see needs. And so it's, I mean, it's that basic. I think I became very, very interested in all this work in 2005 when Laura said, you know, oh, we have to think about a 10th anniversary. What are we going to do? And I had a friend who was Tim Knowles, who also educated in somewhere in around these buildings. And he was in Chicago. He showed me a clipping of the front page article of the Chicago Tribune, and in bold letters, out of 100 boys who entered 9th grade in the Chicago public schools, 100 boys, 9th grade, by the time they're 25, 6 will have graduated from college. But if you're African American or Latino, it drops down to 2.5 out of 100. And, you know, it was like one of those moments in time. If I saw it another day, I might have said, okay, that's terrible, you know. But it just struck me that day. And because of what Tim does, because he's in education, all that, it just became sort of like, no, we can't live in that. This is just not possible. And so there is a moment when, you know, you get kind of, you just can't not do something.
My sense is that you've contributed so much to our country that it's unfortunate there's this kind of double standard for immigrants.
Oh, okay. Well, I know this is kind of, maybe I didn't answer your question. Double standard for immigrants? I don't know. Immigrants have to try harder, actually, because there's less safety net.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Jen Chutak. I'm a recent alumna of the Harvard Kennedy School. On several occasions, I've had the great joy of being a member of your global audience, and each time I'm struck by your presence so much. It's so moving, the joy and the life that you emanate, and you've actually redefined my definition of a rock star, not just your musical talent, but this life that you project. And so the question that I have for you pertains to an offhand comment that you made to Professor Gergen earlier this evening, why you do what you do. So I know why I gravitate to your performance and to your conversation because of this joy and life you emanate. But could you share with us, way back all the way to when you were 4 till now, why you do what you do?
Sure. Very easy. When I was 4, I thought, you know, at the time when kids say, oh, I want to be a fireman, whatever, I was so confused. I just wanted to understand. That was my big goal in life. I just wanted to understand. And it took me, I'd say, the next 45 years of doing lots of things, music, etc., that made, and it wasn't until I was 49 that I realized that all of the things I'm interested in is because I really love people. That's it.
Please.
Perhaps that will segue nicely into my question. I'm Allison Pingree, and it's a pleasure to have you here. I work at the SLATE initiative here at the Kennedy School, which stands for Strengthening Learning and Teaching Excellence. So we work to support excellence and innovation in the teaching that goes on here at the Kennedy School. I was very struck by your description of when you were performing that the most important person in the room is the audience and not you, and that you want to leave your audience with something that they'll remember. And I couldn't help but think about analogies between that and the act of teaching. And so I'm curious to hear you reflect on what you've learned about teaching by being a musician and what you've learned about being a musician by teaching.
Okay, that's a very, very good question. I'm not going to answer it. No. Well, I can tell you that when the Silk Road first came to Harvard, we were faced with a dilemma because none of us are the world's expert on anything. You know, we may have some mastery over things, know certain traditions, we care about things. So how do we interact at a university that, you know, has this kind of aura, a reputation, et cetera, et cetera? And so we came up with, I think, a conniving plan, which is to say that we just know what we know. We're not trying, so if we're trying to do a class or something, we're just sharing what we know. And in fact, we think that the best teachers are always learning, and the best students, by being passionate about what they're learning, are always sharing and teaching. So in fact, I don't see a difference between the two. And so if you're in a state of striving to learn, you know what the dirty little secret is, that you actually stay, you feel more alive. If you're constantly learning, you're constantly reorganizing your neurons. And it's like, you know, you're learning new things, not just like you're learning new things within your field, but that you're actually, you have to create new synapses. You know, you have to do that. And then I made another sort of jump, and I may be crazy, but I think that where a performer and teaching have in common is that the only reason to do either one truly is if you can make the learning or the performance memorable. Because how good is it if you go home tomorrow and you say, well, I knew I did something last night, but I have no idea what it was. And how awful is it that a student aces his or her exam, but crams, and then says, okay, thank goodness, I got it, it's done, I never have to deal with this ever again. That's really, that's a poorer version of education than I think what you and I are trying to talk about. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Hello, Mr. Ma. My name is John, and I'm from the Kennedy School. Welcome back to Harvard. I have to begin my question with a confession of sorts.
Okay.
As also a son of immigrant
Please,
parents,
yeah.
as a son of immigrant parents, I also sat down in front of a music stand, in front of a metronome, in front of a full-size cello that was too big for my frame, and I heard my mom say, "Practice." And I was like, "Mom, I don't want to practice." And she was, "Practice." And I learned quickly that America's not always a democracy. And so, but I kept complaining, and she said, "Look at Yo-Yo Ma. He plays the cello well." He plays the cello well, and he went to Harvard. And, so and I quietly said to myself, "Curse you, Yo-Yo Ma."
Hit me. Yeah.
But it piqued the curiosity in me, and I wanted to know more about you. And so that was right when you released Hush with Bobby McFerrin. I think it was in 1991. And that changed my perspective of the cello. I found out that cello could be fun. I don't have to play these old, boring songs. And the music on the CD, like Flight of the Bumblebee, Hush Little Baby, I mean, those were actually fun for me. And it changed my perception, and I wanted to play. And so I first wanted to also thank you for having the courage and creativity of doing something a little bit unorthodox, because I think it saved a young boy from going to the dark side, which I would have defined as a life without music. So my question now is this. Given all the passions and portfolios that you have, what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't playing the cello?
Well, knowing that now, since for the last 9 years, I've realized I really love people, I think I would probably be involved in some form of work with people, and knowing of my interest in anthropology and cultures, probably working in some form, and learning is part of my life, and sharing what I learn is part of my life. So I'd say those values and interests remain probably constant or consistent, and so I'd be doing something in that encompass those interests. And I'm sorry for causing you all this trouble. I'm so sorry. See, it's so easy to inspire hate. I didn't do anything.
Good evening. My name is Anna Meschian. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I'm a graduate of New England Conservatory. I studied with Patricia Zander. Actually inspired by the Citizen Musician Project and El Sistema from Venezuela, which is an incredible project in Venezuela, music education project. I started a program in my home country, I'm also an immigrant, Armenia, and basically just trying to get as many kids as possible to embrace this idea, instead of just being on this path of practicing by yourself 8 hours a day and then just getting up on stage and being completely separated from your audience, trying to get as many kids involved in this. And the kids have been incredible in grabbing onto this idea. But along the way, there have been so many people who have told me, don't work with those kids who are pre-conservatory kids. Your job is so different from theirs. The music schools that they go to have such a different mission than what you have. And I said, well, what is the difference? And they said, well, your job, or what you're trying to do, is you're trying to make people's lives better through music. And that completely confused me, because I thought that was every musician's job. And part of the reason that I wanted to do this is because I wanted to bring my conservatory training to everyone. And so my question is, in working with this world of music for social change, I often feel pain that there's a separation of the social change kind of music and then the good kind of music, the very high art. And for me, there's no distinction. And I'm wondering, what do you think is do you think this is a growing pain, or do you think there's some obligation that we have to make sure that these two don't become so separate, and so we don't lose the high art? If that makes sense.
Yes, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think this is obviously very individual, but on the institutional side, I could say that if we value teaching so much, or if rather, if we know that education is so important, where do we place teaching on the hierarchy of values within any institution? That's a really important question. So in conservatory, where I also went, teaching music ed was considered like, the dregs. And we have these sayings, which I really truly don't believe, when people say, well, those who can't do, teach. But, you have those words going in your head, and if you don't examine those words, you might just believe that to be true. And so I think what I can tell you, my own experience, is that by going to the show and tells with my children and then going into schools, or inner city schools, and dealing with others, or opening myself to other cultures and loving the duduk, for example, and what it has done, it's actually made me do better on both ends. I can relate more easily to anybody. And also on the supposedly high end of, is your Dvorak concerto better? I think I'm a better musician. So I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. It's only when you silo those places and assign a value that is not necessarily true. You can make it true if you say that's really the way it is. But if you believe otherwise, you can prove it. And you can prove it by actually getting better on all sides.
Yeah, time for two more questions, please.
Hi there, my name is Carolyn Yee. I'm a first year at the college. I'm on the JFK Junior Forum Committee, so I have a question for you on behalf of a Twitter follower. The question is...
Come into the microphone just a bit more.
Sorry about that. The question is, how do you get your message across to people who don't see an intrinsic value in music, art, and culture?
Well, I mean, I think, as human beings, we are multi-sensate. Some people are more visual, more oral, and people like to be tactile and whatever. I mean, I challenge anybody to come to me and say, there's no value in this and whatever. If that person's a parent, I would be very scared for the child. I think, I don't think you're dealing with individuals who may say something, but you have to examine where that statement comes from. Who are they? And why are they saying that? I mean, that's back to the old question. I just think that who is not moved by seeing a gorgeous sunset? Who is not amazed when you look out in the night sky and you see billions of stars? Tell me it's not beautiful. Tell me it has that wonder and awe that you might feel has no value, doesn't inspire action, doesn't inspire thought. I mean, tell me that seeing the miracle of a birth, of a child coming, tell me that that's, okay, we're going to, I just don't, I can't, my imagination is too limited to conceive that someone would actually believe that. And so I would actually say these things to them and say, let's talk about you. What makes your life rich and filled with, where does your love for something come from?
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, Mr. Ma. My name is Michelle Lee. I'm a sophomore at the college, and I'm studying anthropology.
and I'm also a pianist, so I really appreciate a lot of the things that you said. Just kind of looking back on my experience with the piano, I think I've had some of my highest and lowest moments in front of the instrument. I think it almost feels sometimes like I have a relationship with it, even though it's an inanimate object, like maybe as if it were a sibling or a friend. So I'm interested to see how you would describe your relationship with the cello and kind of how it's changed as you've grown up and kind of gone through life and, you know, gone through college and become a father and hit those milestones.
Okay. Well, I sympathize very much with your saying that you feel a relationship with the instrument from which you are expressing yourself, right? And I think, and I never think it's, the way I think of the cello, it's very simple. The bow arm, the one that draws out the notes, are my lungs. And the 4 strings are an extension of my vocal cords. So basically, you want to take that inanimate object and make it essentially an extension of your body, of your brain, of your thoughts. So it's what you want in your relationship with an instrument is to have the least amount of interruption or impediments between thinking something, wanting to hear something, and having it come out. The reason we practice is to actually diminish that distance of time between thinking something, having a concept, having an architectural plan for something, and then to say, okay, this is how we're going to do that, and it just comes out. And that's the reason I don't think practicing, for example, to answer an earlier question, is for its own sake is good, but having little goals in practicing actually makes something more familiar. You're building your own house, you know, mental, musical, cultural house in your head, and what you put into an instrument helps actually reveal, you know, Tina Blythe likes to say that we want to make education visible. You're making your thoughts audible. You're making your feelings audible. And it's that, you know, cycle that you're constantly working on so that it becomes more and more fluid.
Thank you.
Okay? The time has come.
The time has come. The time has come. The walrus said, could you bless us with one final piece as we leave?
No, I can't bless you with a final piece, but I can attempt to perform something that may refer a little bit to some of the things we've been talking about.
We will attempt to relate to it in the way that you've said. It's hard. It's been hard. It's been an extraordinary evening. We're so honored by your presence here. But we'd love to hear you one more time.
Okay. Well, let me describe what I was thinking of doing, because that's partially from a request that you were mentioning, and I think, so we were talking about a lot of ideas, some abstract, some more, you know, humorous, some completely inane, and I'd like to put some put a footprint in the ground. Let's go to some evidence of another piece of music by Bach, and here's, so what I'd like to show in playing is that there's a piece of music that I play often at my friends' weddings, and I've also played, unfortunately, at my friends' memorial services. And it's the same piece of music. So it seems like, at first, a contradiction, right? And there's one more thing. The one more thing is that, so Bach wrote for this instrument, which has 4 strings, but if you see, unlike the guitar, when you can play all 6 strings at once, there's a curved bridge, so I can only play generally 1 string at a time, and at most 2 strings at the same time. If I want to play 3 strings, I could do that, but you know, it's not so pretty. So, but he composed a piece of music for 4 voices. So how did he do that? Because I can't sustain 4 voices. And I want to give you an example of that, and then I'm going to play you the piece. So maybe, so if I play from, so Mike, who's so incredibly wonderful and does everything beautifully, is going to help me make the impossible thing that Bach did actually make it come to fruition, that you can actually hear all 4 voices at one time, 3 or 4 voices, right? And then I'm going to play you the piece without Mike, and we'll see what happens. So let's say we go from, okay, great. Thanks, Mike. Thank you very much. So you know how he played Daddy block earlier on in the first piece. Now, I would like you all to participate, but this time not by singing, but participating and using your ears, that when you hear a low note, and I'm only holding on to it for a minute second, you fill it in with your ear and keep it going, okay? And in doing so, I think what we're giving evidence that, you know, that culture and memory and effort plays a part in joining something together. Because alone, I can only suggest something. But in your minds, you actually make it complete. So whether it's an act of citizenship, cultural citizenship, you know, social citizenship, whatever it is, you are actually engaged in that effort. So I'm going to play you that complete saraband, and let's see how it comes out. Okay. So, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, sir.